Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be talking about how China is preparing for the worst case scenario in regards to the American national security threat. And I've talked about this a lot on different videos. We are seeing a lot of signs that China, which typically would not directly mention the United States in its foreign policy speeches and foreign policy white papers, they're mentioning the United States directly now. And that speaks volumes to the fact that they're expecting a more direct competition and they're expecting that diplomatic avenues have already been tossed aside and that they're not viable options anymore. You're also just seeing this in how China is reacting to the United States. So things like maintaining military channels. China doesn't want to do that because the United States wants to use those channels for great power competition. And China really just wants to focus on its trade empire because it knows that the United States is collapsing and it doesn't want to give it any type of patriotic revival through competition like the United States got to a very large extent with the Soviet Union. And so China is doing its best to really just kind of ignore the United States because, as embarrassing as it must be for the United States at this point, the United States is kind of irrelevant to China. China really doesn't want to have to bother with it. It doesn't want America to bother China. And so China is doing everything possible to not get into a great power competition with a declining power such as the United States, while China has other things, more important things that they would rather be doing. But let's read this article by the South China Morning Post on what's happening and why China is preparing for a worst case scenario. China is facing more complex challenges. President Xi Jinping warns of worst case situation. Remarks come as China and the United States continue to look home on many fronts. So they have different reactions to looking home on many fronts. So if things are bad domestically, the United States looks to foment conflict abroad in order to give the United States an enemy to focus on. So just kind of distract them from the problems. China actually tackles the problems. They will work on infrastructure. They'll figure out whatever the best solution is that they have available to them, and they will try to actually tackle the problem, whereas the United States focuses on distraction. So different reactions to domestic problems. Officials must stay keenly aware of challenges and prepare for most extreme scenarios, President Xi Jinping tells National Security Commission. Okay, so the reason he's talking like this, and I've seen increasing evidence of this. When was this article published? Okay, just a couple weeks ago. I've seen increasing evidence of this, that China directly expects a military conflict with the United States at this point. They're just trying to stave it off as long as possible because China wins in the long term no matter what. But the United States is facing an existential crisis, and it absolutely needs to destroy its competitor before the United States just declines out of the potential of being a world power. Comments show China harbors no illusions about fallout of U.S. rivalry and has little hope of a lasting improvement in ties, analyst says. That's exactly correct. And that is that there is no hope for United States-China ties, because for ties to improve, there has to be some benefit to both sides. And right now, there's a lot of benefit to China if ties improve, because China is going to be a world power, maybe even the sole superpower in the future, given its manufacturing base. It understood what made America great, even if America forgot that. And so America, though, recognizes that it's not able to continue to exist in any way, shape, or form as a global military power if it has an actual legitimate peer. And because of that, there's really no possibility of improvement in ties between these countries because this is an existential crisis for the United States. The United States needs China to lose in order for the United States to win. Okay. And so, given that, what else can China do aside from? Let me see if there's anything else on this article. Country security apparatus. Yeah, there's a lot more here. I'm going to try to read it out. It might not be completely readable for people who are watching this on TikTok or YouTube Shorts, but we see here China is facing more complex and difficult security concerns. Country's security apparatus needed to stay keenly aware of the complicated and challenging circumstances facing national security and correctly grasp major related issues, according to state news. The national security issue facing China were considerably more complex and much more difficult to deal with. Worst case and most extreme scenarios, high winds and waves, and even perilous storms. Okay, so both sides have stepped up national security scrutiny, especially in the technology sector. So, United States has been sanctioning China quite frequently in the technology sector, and China is retaliating back with some sanctions against companies like Micron, as well as refusing to sell rare earth materials, metals, that are used in the building of semiconductors. And since China is the major producer of those rare earth materials, they are essentially barring the United States from being able to build semiconductors. Recently prohibited its key infrastructure operators from buying, Micron. Okay, so interesting things here. Modernization of national security system and capabilities, practical and effective, urge to improve oversight of internet data and artificial intelligence. So they're a little bit behind in artificial intelligence, and I've talked about this before, but they're about 2 years behind in generative AI, which is things like ChatGPT. But that's 2 years behind the innovators, the absolute cutting edge. If you're the runner up, it's actually less than 2 years to get caught up because you can watch how the other competitors, how the innovator has already done it and mimic what they've done in order to get caught up. I think China has a lot of advantages. So once they get caught up, they can actually pull out ahead in generative AI. They are ahead in most critical infrastructure or critical technologies needed for the future of their economy. I believe there were 47 different ones. Generative AI was one of the few that they were slightly behind in. The meeting also approved the speedy implementation of a nationwide security risk monitoring and early warning system, stronger public education on national security. So China takes education seriously. The United States really just allowed small cabals, cults of people to take over the education system. And that's what people need to become more aware of is in America, there are a few major educational institutions that produce the majority of the education teachers. And if you take over those institutions, then you're taking over the worldviews, paradigms, lenses that the majority of the teachers of the United States use in order to teach the kids. And so what would happen is there would be a few major teaching colleges, and then they would go and teach at the other teaching colleges and infect them with the same worldview and things like the Frankfurt School, critical race theory, social justice. Those are all mentalities that came from mostly similar origins, and they mostly came from a few really upstream, we could call them, teaching colleges where everything stems from there. And then once you have that, once you have the K through 12 educational system, then those people end up growing up and going to college, and then they will be in all the other majors, every other major, and they'll have the worldview that they were taught in K through 12. Because people don't realize this, but you, for the most part, do hold on to the same beliefs that you had throughout your time as a kid. I mean, if all of your teachers had the same mindset, the same perspective, you're likely going to be adopting that because those are your educators for 12-ish years of your life. And China recognizes this, and so for them, they put a lot of emphasis on making sure the education and the educators are teaching people things that are beneficial for national cohesion and a harmonious society. Okay, so Xi Jinping here is also talking about, aside from securing the educational system, strengthen safeguards in key sectors, economy, major infrastructure, finance, and telecom networks, improve data, biological resources, nuclear, space, and maritime security. So he understands what's important to focus on here. Also sounded a warning then about choppy waters and dangerous storms ahead as he highlighted the challenges and risks facing the country. Okay, so yeah. Yeah, so here, an associate professor at the National University of Singapore's Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy said Xi's remarks meant Beijing was convinced that recent minor improvements in Sino-US relations would be short-lived. So he understands that these are very temporary. The United States is just trying to properly angle itself to come out the winner of any conflict with China. It's not China. The only way the United States would want to fully repair relations with China is if it's of benefit to them. And there's clearly no benefit for them doing that. They only lose at this point. And that's a position that the United States put themselves in. It's not a position that China put them in. And here, Xi is saying that the United States is the culprit behind China's problem. So he is directly naming them, which is very rare. If you know anything about Chinese leaders, that's very, very, very rare. Okay, so I think that covers everything I wanted to go over here. Essentially, there's no point in having these types of relations because the United States doesn't benefit from the repairing of relationships, the improvement of relationships, because they need to distract away from the decline of their nation. They need to distract their domestic population from that decline. So if you liked this video, please actually upvote the video. It helps me in the algorithm. And please subscribe to our channel for more content. We're constantly figuring out ways to benefit from how the algorithm works. We're constantly figuring out ways to collaborate with others, ways to improve the stream in general. And as you can see, the new mic is working decently well. Once we move into the new content creation studio, I'll be using a mic arm, and so it'll have a little bit better sound. I'm also working on all the different audio settings. So yeah, a lot of improvements coming. So thank you for sticking with us, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.